The day Abena got fired was the same day she saved a man's life. She did not think about it that way at first. She thought about the box in her arms. The one the floor supervisor slid across the desk toward her without making eye contact, and how light it was. 11 years at Ridgemont General Hospital in Edmonton, Alberta, and everything she had accumulated fit into a box that weighed less than a bag of groceries. A spare pair of shoes, a framed photograph of her mother standing outside their church in Accra, a small bottle of shea butter she kept in her locker because the hospital air was always too dry. That was it. 11 years. The supervisor's name was Gerald. He had worked at Ridgemont for 3 years, which meant Abena had been there before him, had trained nurses who trained him, had stayed late covering shifts when the hospital was short-staffed, and Gerald was still learning how to read a budget report. But none of that was on the table now. What was on the table was a single sheet of paper, unauthorized treatment of an uninsured patient, direct violation of hospital financial protocol. Effective immediately. Gerald cleared his throat. "I want you to know this wasn't my decision." Abena looked at him. She did not say anything. The administration reviewed the file and, "Gerald," her voice was quiet, not angry. "Something past anger. Please don't." She picked up the box. She walked out. The hallway of the 3rd floor smelled the way it always smelled. Antiseptic and floor wax, and something underneath both of those things that no cleaning product could fully cover. The smell of bodies in distress, of people at the worst moments of their lives. Abena had walked this hallway so many times she no longer noticed it. But she noticed it now. She noticed everything now. A nurse named Petra, who Abena had mentored for 4 years, saw her coming and looked away quickly. A porter named David, who always brought her coffee when she worked double shifts, stopped his cart and just stared. A doctor Abena had never liked, Dr. Fenn, walked past with his eyes down, the particular kind of deliberate blindness that belongs to people who know they should say something and choose not to. Abena kept walking. She pushed through the side exit, the one that led to the staff parking lot, and she stood in the November air in Edmonton, which is a specific and serious kind of cold, the kind that clarifies things, and she breathed. She did not cry. She had cried the night before, after it happened, when she drove home alone and sat in her car in front of her apartment building for 40 minutes because she could not make herself go inside. She had cried then. She was done crying now. She thought about the man. His name was Joseph, or at least, that's what he'd told the orderly who'd found him collapsed outside the emergency entrance at 11:40 at night, semi-conscious on the concrete with no wallet, no phone, and no identification. A security guard had called it in. The ER team had stabilized him. And then, at 12:20 in the morning, while Abena was doing her rounds on the 3rd floor, the call came through. Uninsured. No payment source confirmed. Attending physician requesting authorization for extended treatment. Authorization had been denied. This was not unusual. This was, in fact, the kind of decision Ridgemont's administration made with a regularity that nobody talked about in meetings, but everyone understood. The hospital had a charity care fund that was technically available and practically inaccessible. There were forms. There were review processes. There was a waiting period. None of those things applied to a man bleeding internally in the middle of the night. Abena had taken the call. She had listened to the ER nurse explain the situation in the flat, careful language people use when they are telling you something is wrong without directly saying so. And then Abena had done something she had never done in 11 years. She had walked down to the ER. She had looked at the chart. She had looked at the man. Joseph, who was maybe 55, maybe older, with work-ruined hands and a graze along his jaw that suggested he had hit the pavement hard when he fell. And she had said very clearly to the attending physician, Treat him. He's not authorized. I'm authorizing it. Abena, you can't. I'm the senior nurse on this floor. I'm authorizing emergency treatment. Document it under my employee number. The doctor had looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked away and began doing his job. They treated Joseph for internal bleeding and a fractured wrist. He spent 2 days in the hospital. By the time he was discharged, the administration had reviewed the file, flagged Abena's authorization as unauthorized, and begun the termination process. She knew it was coming. She had known it was coming the moment she said the words. She had said them anyway. Standing in the parking lot now, she still did not regret it. That was the strangest part. She had lost 11 years of her career, her benefits, her pension contributions, and whatever future she might have had at Ridgemont General. And she stood in the cold Edmonton air, holding a box with a photograph and a bottle of shea butter, and she did not regret it. She just did not know what came next. What came next, for 3 weeks, was very little. Abena moved through her days with the careful deliberateness of someone who has had a shock and is waiting to feel it fully. She called her mother in Accra, not to tell her what happened, just to hear her voice. She went to church on Sunday because the routine of it grounded her. She updated her resume, which took an afternoon and left her feeling hollowed out in a way she couldn't explain. She applied to 2 positions. Both acknowledged her application. Neither called back. She had money saved, not a lot, but enough for a few months if she was careful. She had a routine. Morning tea, a walk along the River Valley Trail near her apartment. Afternoons spent reading or watching the slow Edmonton sky turn from gray to gray. She cooked proper meals because she had always believed that cooking proper meals was a form of self-respect that people too often abandoned when things got hard. She did not talk about what happened to most people. The ones she did tell responded with a version of the same 3 sentences. That's awful. You did the right thing. But you can't help anyone if you lose your own stability. She understood the logic. She simply could not make herself believe it applied to the man on that floor at 12:20 in the morning. It was her friend Daphne who first told her about the building. Daphne had known Abena since university, which meant she had seen her through things, and she had the quality, rare in people, of not offering advice unless asked for it. She called one evening. They talked for an hour about nothing, and near the end Daphne mentioned almost casually that the building on her street had a maintenance posting. It's not what you do, Daphne said carefully. Tell me. It's the Montrose building. You know, the one on 112th? Big old place, kind of beautiful actually. Looks like it used to be something. They need someone for general maintenance and building upkeep. The super retired. Abena was quiet for a moment. I don't know anything about building maintenance. The posting says they'll train. It comes with the basement suite. A pause. Abena, you'd have somewhere to live. The apartment she was renting cost $1,400 a month. She had enough saved for 3 more months of it. Send me the posting, she said. The Montrose building had been once a very fine place. You could still see it in the bones. The original pressed tin ceilings in the lobby, the ironwork on the staircase railing, the tall windows that let in real light. It was 12 stories, 60 units, and it had not been updated since sometime in the early 90s. The hallways smelled of old wood and other people's cooking. The elevator was slow and sincere. Abena got the job. She moved into the basement suite on a Thursday in December, which is not the most optimistic month to begin a new chapter in Edmonton, but she was practical about it. She learned quickly. The building manager, a retired electrician named Frank, who was staying on part-time through the transition, showed her the mechanical room in the basement with the pride of a man who had kept something running through force of will alone. He showed her the boiler, the water shutoffs, the breaker panel. He showed her which units had chronic issues and which tenants were good about reporting problems versus which ones waited until something was actually flooding before mentioning it. Unit 1107, he said. Top floor, corner. That one. He stopped. Just take care of that one. Don't ask questions. He's not difficult. He's just private. Abena noted it. The tenants were a specific cross-section of Edmonton that you don't see in the glass towers downtown. A retired schoolteacher on the 4th floor who paid her rent a month early and left homemade soup outside her neighbor's doors during cold snaps. A young family on 7 with a baby who cried at 2 in the morning and parents who looked like they hadn't slept since August. A group of university students on 3 who were genuinely trying to be too considerate and occasionally failing. An elderly Ghanaian man on 9 named Mr. Asare who called Abena Akua, the name given to girls born on Wednesday, every time he saw her, which made her feel inexplicably less far from home. She fixed a broken radiator on 5. She replaced a light fixture in the lobby. She unclogged a drain on 8 and repainted the wall in the stairwell near the 7th floor, where someone had, for reasons she preferred not to examine, punched through the drywall. She was good at the work, which surprised her. She had spent 11 years in a building, keeping people alive through knowledge and precision and the willingness to make decisions under pressure. The skills transferred more than she expected. She did not think about Ridgemont General every day. Some days she thought about it. She had been the lead nurse on the overnight pediatric floor. She had been good at it. Not just competent, but good. The kind of good that other nurses noticed, that families noticed when they thanked her specifically, and not the floor in general. She had held the hands of children who were scared, and parents who were more scared than the children, and she had known, in those moments, exactly what she was doing and why it mattered. She missed it. She mopped the lobby on Tuesday mornings, and she missed it. She met the man from 1107 for the first time in the 4th week. He was in the lobby when she came to replace a burned-out bulb near the mailboxes. He was collecting his mail, his back to her, and she had a moment to look at him before he turned. He was tall, broad-shouldered, perhaps late 60s, dark skin, close-cropped gray hair, a deliberate stillness about the way he moved that she associated with people who had learned, somewhere, to be very careful about taking up space. He was wearing work clothes, not the kind people wore to look casual, actual work clothes, worn and clean, the kind a man wore because he worked with his hands. He turned and saw her. He nodded. "You're the new super," he said. "I am, Abena." She held out her hand. He shook it. His handshake was firm and brief. "August, anything you need in the unit. Frank mentioned you sometimes have issues with the radiator." Something moved across August's face. Not quite a smile. "Frank worries too much. The radiator is fine, I manage." "All right." She held up the bulb. "Just replacing this." He watched her climb the small stepladder, replace the bulb, come back down. A task that took 2 minutes. "You're overqualified for this," he said. She looked at him. "Excuse me?" "The way you moved through that. The efficiency." He shrugged. "People who are built for a job look a certain way when they're doing something that isn't their job." Abena held the old bulb and studied him. "That's a specific observation. I've had practice noticing things." He tucked his mail under his arm and walked toward the elevator. She watched him go. She saw him again 2 weeks later, in the mechanical room. He had come down. She didn't know how he'd gotten in. The room was supposed to be locked, and he was standing with his arms crossed in front of the boiler, frowning at it with the expression of a man who understood what he was looking at. "The pressure's low," he said when she came in. "I know. I've got to call in to the service company." He looked at her. You don't need the service company. He looked back at the boiler. Bleed the radiators on 12 and 11 first. It's an airlock. This building has always had it. He paused. Take the key off the valve, counterclockwise. Watch for the water. Takes about 20 minutes. Abena crossed her arms. How do you know that? I owned this building for 14 years. The sentence sat in the room between them like a piece of furniture that hadn't been there before. Abena waited. I sold it 2 years ago, August said, to a developer, but I kept the unit. He said it simply, without drama. I like it here. You owned this building. She said it back to him not as a question, but to hear how it sounded. I owned a lot of buildings. He looked at the boiler again. Bleed 12 first. You'll feel the difference in 20 minutes. He walked out. She stared at the boiler for a moment. Then she got the key and did what he'd said. He was right. 20 minutes. The pressure came back up, and the heating stabilized across the top 4 floors, and she stood in the mechanical room and thought about a man who owned buildings and wore work clothes and lived in a corner unit on the 11th floor of one of his former properties and collected his own mail. She did not know what to make of that. In February, Frank had a fall on the ice outside his own home and broke his hip. He called Abena from the hospital, apologetic and in pain, and she told him not to be sorry and to focus on getting better. He would be out for at least 6 weeks. This meant Abena was managing alone. She managed. It was during a routine check on the 8th floor that she heard it. A sound from Unit 812, the small 2-bedroom at the end of the hall. A child coughing. Not the cough of a cold. Something deeper, with a quality to it she recognized from 11 years on a hospital floor. She knocked. The woman who opened the door was somewhere in her mid-30s, with the particular exhaustion on her face of someone who has not slept properly in many days. A child of about 7 stood behind her, looking up at Abena with large, cautious eyes. The coughing came again, and Abena realized it was the child. I'm sorry to bother you, the woman said immediately. Was it too loud? I've been trying to keep him quiet, but no, Abena said. I heard him from the hallway. How long has he been coughing like that? The woman, her name was Priya, Abena learned, looked at her son. 4 days. Has he seen a doctor? Priya pressed her lips together. We're waiting on our coverage. My husband changed jobs in November and there was a gap and... She stopped. He's been to a walk-in. They said it wasn't serious. Can I listen to his breathing? Priya looked at her with the uncertain expression of someone deciding how much to trust a stranger. I'm a nurse, Abena said. Retired. But I'm a nurse. She was not retired. She had been fired. But the distinction felt unimportant in this hallway. She did not have a stethoscope. She had not had one since the box. She pressed her ear carefully to the child's back, the way nurses had done long before stethoscopes existed, and she listened. What she heard made her straighten up. His name is Rohan? She asked Priya, who nodded. Priya, I need you to take Rohan to the emergency department tonight. Not a walk-in. The emergency department. Tell them his breathing has this quality. She described it in the language of medical handoffs, clear and specific, and they will take it seriously. You tell them exactly those words, but we don't have the coverage. The province covers emergency care. You will not be billed for what he needs tonight. She said it with certainty, because she knew it was true, and because Priya needed certainty right now. Will your husband be home soon? He's home. Go tonight. Please, don't wait until morning. Priya looked at her son. Then she looked back at Abena with the expression of a woman who has just found something she was afraid she'd lost. Thank you, she said. It came out barely above a whisper. Abena went home. She did not sleep well. In the morning, she had a text from an unknown number. We went. He's okay. They're treating him. Thank you, Priya. She sat with the text for a long time. She did not tell August about Rohan. She had no reason to. But 2 days later, she was mopping the 9th floor when the elevator opened, and August stepped out with 2 paper bags of groceries, and something about the way he looked at her, that particular still attention he had, made her say it. "There's a boy on 8, 7 years old. He's going to be okay, but it was close." August set the groceries down on the hallway floor. What was it? Pneumonia. Early stage, his parents had a gap in coverage. Did they get care? I sent them. Last night. He looked at her for a moment. "You stayed outside your job description again. I seem to do that." "Why?" She thought about it honestly. Not the easy answer, but the real one. "Because I was standing there. Someone had to be standing there, and I was the one standing there." She paused. "That's not noble. That's just arithmetic." August picked up his groceries. He was quiet for what felt like a long time. Then he said, "You were a nurse." "I was." "What happened?" She told him. The whole thing. Joseph, the authorization, the box, the parking lot in November. She had not told many people the full version. It came out steadily, without drama, the way she'd told it to herself in the weeks after. Factually, with the specific details that made it real. August listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet. "The hospital fired you for authorizing care for an uninsured patient," he said. "Yes." "And the man, Joseph, do you know what happened to him?" "No. He was discharged before I was. I never saw him again." August nodded slowly. He picked up his groceries. "You made the right decision," he said. "I want you to know I think that." "I know I made the right decision," Abena said. That was never the question. Something changed in his face then. A small thing, but she caught it. "What was the question?" he asked. "Whether the right decision had a future in it. For me." He nodded again. Then he walked to his unit. She watched the door close. 3 days later, she got a phone call. The number was a Toronto area code. The voice on the other end was a woman, professional, the particular register of someone who made calls like this frequently. "Is this Abena Mensa Osei?" "It is. My name is Carolyn. I'm calling on behalf of a private foundation. We were given your name in connection with a situation at Ridgemont General Hospital in Edmonton." A pause. "Would you be open to a conversation?" Abena sat down. "About what?" "About a role. A consulting role, initially, but with the possibility of something more permanent. The foundation works with hospital systems across the country to develop emergency care protocols for underinsured patients. We are looking for someone with clinical expertise and, how do I put this, demonstrated commitment to the work." Another pause. "You come highly recommended." "By whom?" A brief silence. Then, "I'm not at liberty to say, specifically. But I can tell you, the recommendation was detailed and personal." Abena looked at the window. The Edmonton sky in February was the particular white of cloud cover that tells you nothing, except that it goes on for a very long time. "Tell me more about the role," she said. She went up to 1107 that evening. She knocked. August opened the door, and for a moment neither of them spoke. He was still in his work clothes. Behind him, she could see his apartment. Spare, tidy, not minimal but clean, with books stacked on a table near the window, and a view of the city that, on the 11th floor of the Montrose building, was genuinely beautiful. "Someone called me today," she said, "from a foundation in Toronto." August held the door open wider. "Would you like to come in?" She stepped inside. The apartment was warm. He had a kettle on. She turned to face him. "Was it you?" He did not insult her by pretending. "I have been involved with that foundation for 8 years. I fund it. I started it, actually, after." He stopped. He moved to the window and looked out at the city he had, apparently, had a hand in building. "After my daughter was turned away from a hospital in Calgary 17 years ago. She was 24. She was between coverage. They treated her, eventually. But there was a delay." He paused. "There was a delay that did not have to happen. Abena was quiet. She recovered, August said. She's in Vancouver now. 2 kids, she's fine. He turned back to Abena. But I spent the next 5 years making more money than I could spend, and the 5 years after that, trying to figure out what to do with it. The foundation was the answer. He looked at her steadily. When I heard about you, when I heard what you did and what it cost you, I wanted to meet you. I wanted to understand what kind of person does that, and I understand. He moved to the kettle. Tea? She sat down at his table. Yes, he made the tea. He brought it to the table and sat across from her. For a moment, they were 2 people in a warm room on the 11th floor of an old building in Edmonton in February, looking at each other honestly. The role is real, he said. It's not charity. You would be building something. The protocol work, the advocacy. It would take everything you know and use it in a way the hospital never did. He wrapped his hands around his mug. But I want you to take it because it's the right fit, not because I feel you're owed it. I don't want to be owed anything, Abena said. I know. He almost smiled. That's partly why I called. She looked at her tea. She thought about the box she had carried out of Ridgemont General in November. She thought about Priya standing in the doorway of 812 with that specific exhaustion on her face, and Rohan coughing with that sound she'd known, and the text that had arrived in the morning. She thought about Joseph, whose last name she still did not know, and whether he was all right. She thought about what it meant to be standing somewhere when you were the one who was there. Tell me about the protocol work, she said. All of it. Start from the beginning. August nodded. He began to talk. Outside the window of the Montrose building, the Edmonton sky was doing what it always did, going on and in every direction, cold and enormous and entirely indifferent. But inside, in a corner unit on the 11th floor, there was tea, and there was work worth doing, and there was a woman who had carried a box out of a parking lot in November and had not, in any of the weeks since, stopped being exactly who she was. That, as it turns out, was the whole point. Now, if you were Abena, and you had the choice to make again, standing in that ER at 12:20 in the morning, would you authorize the treatment? Or would you walk away and protect the career you had spent 11 years building? Drop your answer below, and if this story stayed with you, you know what to do. We will be back with another one, and we don't want you to miss it.